Interesting to know. Printing an object. In Python, we have just printed out the attributes of book objects belonging to a class that we created. Now, let us try to print the object itself, that is, the book object itself. For starters, we would create any book object that we like. Book is equals to book, how to train your dragon, Cressida Cowell, 256. Next, we will attempt to directly print this object to the screen. Print book. The output we obtain is a little funky and looks something like this. Yours will be somewhat different. Main.bookObject at 0x00 etc. Notice that we get main.bookObject at 0x00 etc. What this tells us is number one, the name of the class. In our case, it is the class book. Number two, a hexadecimal number. This tells us exactly where we will find this particular book object in our system memory, RAM. Now you see, this is exactly why we need to make use of object attributes to get information and more details about the object in question, because simply printing the object as we have seen does not return or provide us with any useful output or output that allows us to directly gain knowledge about the object in question. Default string representation. A few moments ago, we obtained information pertaining to our book object by accessing and making use of the attributes title, author, and pages. Just now, we also tried printing the book object itself, but we did not get outputted with informative information. Before we proceeded to access the attributes, we first need to be aware of the fact that the attributes exist. And to know that the attribute exists, we need to be aware of the structure of the class book. Because by looking at the structure of the class, we will be able to see which attributes are accessed by which name. A very convenient setup would be if the object automatically knew what attributes exist for each object, and if it could organize the attributes into a string statement sequence and print itself out to the screen for us to have an easier viewing. Basically, instead of us manually accessing each attribute of each book, it would be very nice if the object could automatically print a string to us, which informs us about the details of the book object that is created. To do this, there is a special method that exists in Python which allows the class to convert an object into a string so that it can be printed to the console. The object will be printed with its corresponding attributes. This method is called the string method. There are two underscores before and after the word str, which is basically a shortened form of string. This method will return a string, which we can use to output appropriate information about the class to which an object belongs and the object itself. In Python, there are several special methods that are denoted by double underscores. Right now, we will look at one of these, the string method in Python. So, let's assume that every time a new book is created in our program, we would like the string method to return a string, statement, sentence which tells us what the details of the book are. We would do so as follows. Remember, we add this code inside the book class. Define string self. Return the author of plus self.title is plus self.author plus with plus string self.pages plus pages. So the full code for our book class will now look like this. Look carefully at the new string method that we have created. This string method only takes one parameter, self, and self, as we know, alludes to the instance that is the object itself, which means that whenever a book object is created, our string method will be triggered, and therefore it will make use of all the parameter values that are specified when creating the book. to output us with a formatted string which tells us the details about the book that was created. For example, book is equals to book How to Train Your Dragon Cressida Cowell, 256. We create a simple book, and the string method ultimately allows us to print the actual book object to the screen. Previously, we were outputted with the class name and a hexadecimal value which alluded to RAM location. But now, when we print the actual book object to the screen, the corresponding attributes for that object are propagated through to the string method which formats the string for us and fills in the values, and we obtain a logical, readable string, statement, or sentence which tells us information about the entire object. In other words, we are not required to access one attribute at a time in an effort to gain knowledge about the object in question. We simply print the book object. Observe. Print book. Output will show as follows. The author of How to Train Your Dragon is Cressida Cowell with 256 pages. Notice, we print the object but we do not get the name of the class nor the hexadecimal number. Now we obtain the string which we set up in the string method. This string method is very useful as we have the ability to format and set the string up in any way that we like. For example, I made a few adjustments to the output that the string method is returning. Instead of our previous return, it will return this. Return \n new book registered \n plus title plus self.title plus \n author plus self.author plus \n pages plus string self.pages plus \n. The lines you see above are underscores and the characters are a backslash with a lowercase letter n. So the code looks like this. My apologies, the code image is a little too small. That is why I pasted the line of code on the previous slide. So output to our book object will now show as follows. It is improved and more readable because we have formatted the string which the string method is returning. You would have realized that the \n will make Python print the following characters on a new line. As we said before, the string method allows our object to be much more user-friendly. If a user would like to view details about his or her book object or an object which belongs to any class for that matter, he or she need not access each attribute individually. Instead, set up a string method for your class, and this will allow you to set up and print a string object which will allow you to obtain any and all information that you would like. Creating more methods for our class. In Python, with regards to classes, we have the ability to create or define as many methods as we like. Possibilities are endless. For example, let us create a simple method that will update the number of pages in a book. For this new method, let us assume the name of this method will be update, and this method, when called, will update the number of pages in a book. Specifically, the update method will add one more page to the current number of pages that make up a book. We would code that method as follows. Define update self, print self.title plus head plus string self.pages plus pages. Self.pages is equals to self.pages plus 1. Print self.title plus now has plus string self.pages plus pages. To be honest with you, I am super sure that you understand the explanation and function of each line of code in the above method that we have defined, but I will provide us with a simple description. So essentially, in the above lines of code, we are doing the following. Number 1. We have used the def keyword in Python to define a new method for our class. And if you recall, methods are often called functions. The terms method and function are used interchangeably by Python programmers. Number 2. After the def keyword, we name our method. We named the method update. Define update self. Print self.title plus head plus string. Self.pages plus pages. Self.pages is equals to self.pages plus 1. Print self.title plus now has plus string self.pages plus pages. After the method name, we used a pair of brackets, parentheses, and thereafter a colon. Within the parentheses, we need to include the self keyword. The self keyword will ensure that the update method is able to be used by all book objects that we create in our Python program. Within this method, we see lines of code. The lines of code that this method will execute are denoted by those that are indented within it. So, our method will first print a statement to the screen. What is it printing? We see that it will print a string to the screen. This string is constructed by simple concatenation methods as we have learnt in a previous tutorial. The only object that needs to be casted is the pages variable, because we cannot add a number to a word, but we can add a word to a word, and in doing so, effectively produce a phrase. Multiple phrases together will give us a string or statement, which is as we observe in this first print statement. So essentially, the first print statement will print the number of pages that we currently have stored in the book variable pages. Then we see a self.pages is equals to self.pages plus 1. This tells us that when the update method is called on a specific object, after printing the current number of pages in the book, we will thereafter add 1 to the instance variable for that particular book. This tells us that only the instance variable storing the number of pages for that particular book will be incremented by 1. Afterwards, we see another print statement which will print the number of pages that make up the book. But remember, now this print statement will print the new number of pages in the book, that is, the original number of pages plus 1. So the full code for our book class data type now looks like this. Now we create a book object. Book is equals to book How to Train Your Dragon Cressida Cowell, 256. Next, we print our book object to the screen to make sure that our string method works well. Print book. We view output to our book as follows. Next, we would like to make use of our update method. Let us see how this turns out. Book.update parenthesis. A reminder, we don't use the print function when calling the update method because the update method is not returning any output to the main program. We learnt about this in our tutorial about functions. Output to our .update method will show as follows. So first we printed the actual book object to the screen, and thereafter we used the .update method. We observed that the book How to Train Your Dragon now has 257 pages. This value becomes the new permanent attribute value. To confirm, we can manually call the pages attribute by using dot notation. Print book.pages. So we observe the new number of pages as seen on the next slide, the last line of output. And notice that the method that we defined within a class has the ability to have a direct impact on the attributes of a specific object. Adding a class docstring. Just as with functions, a class can also accommodate an optional string at the beginning of the class after the class name. This optional string is called a docstring, document string, and is used to provide additional information about the class. It could tell us what the class does, the purpose the class serves in our code, or just in general, any important points to mention about a class which needs to be brought to the attention of a developer or programmer who is reading the code script. To define a docstring, the most common default way is to make use of triple quotation marks. However, you may use single or double quotations if you like. The reason for using triple quotations is to allow for the docstring to span multiple lines. An example of creating a docstring in a class is as follows. Let us create a docstring for our book class. If we add a docstring to the code that we already have, we would obtain this. To access the docstring of a class, we may make use of the doc method. There are two underscores before and after the word doc. You may call and use the doc method on the class itself or the object. Irrespective of the approach you use, the docstring and hence output returned will be the same. Output in our case will show as follows.